Hello and welcome to Ukraine Today. I'm Volodymyr Solokhub. Joining me now to discuss the outcome of the Ukraine Week in the European Parliament is the Deputy Speaker of the Ukrainian Parliament, Ms. Oksana Syroyid. Ms. Syroyid, welcome to Ukraine Today.
Welcome. Thank you.
Ms. Syroyid, the Ukrainian Week in the European Parliament took place last week, and during this high-level meeting, the former President of the European Parliament, Mr. Pat Cox, presented a list of recommendations to improve the Ukrainian Parliament, which consisted of 52 items. Did these recommendations come as a surprise for the Ukrainian MPs?
This is a very, very interesting question. First of all, I had to say that, of course, a lot of those shortfalls or problems that were identified by Mr. Cox, they were obvious. But because of the lack of trust and maybe this legacy of mistrust and inability to communicate properly, the MPs themselves could not openly express those problems and identify the ways how to solve them. What Mr. Cox did and showed us as probably the possible tradition is how to communicate in between ourselves. Because he communicated this issue, he talked to approximately 100 people here in Parliament. And why his recommendations are so valid and with very high legitimacy? Because he actually expressed our own pain, and our own feeling of problems.
So basically, this wasn't something new. This was something which the Ukrainian MPs see every day.
Moreover, this was not. First, it was not new, but secondly, he identified those problems in a very dignified manner. For example, when he was trying to describe this sitting of this. Of our council, Погоджувальна Рада, yes, of our this sitting where we discussed the agenda.
Yeah, the internal meetings of the parliament.
Yeah, and it's public, and he told it cannot be public because it looks like a Hollywood where everybody tries to win the Oscar, and it should be put in a manner that would allow you to set the best agenda for the parliament, not to win the Oscar. So wherever he found the problem, he was trying to describe the shortfalls in a manner that would allow MPs to see the ways how to solve it.
Mr. Reid, if you're saying that these were some of the problems which were identified were obvious and this didn't come as a surprise, why wasn't Ukrainian Parliament solving these problems in the past? Why do the MPs wait for someone else to come and say, hey, this is the problem, go and fix it?
This is what I was trying to tell you, that we don't have trust to each other. All the breaks of parliamentary procedure, this is the result of mistrust. So to improve the procedure is the consequence of the ability to work together and to trust each other, not vice versa.
So if you don't have trust, how do you plan to implement these changes, these recommendations?
What is the best outcome of this presentation of and research of our problem in a parliamentary procedure done by Mr. Cox is that now we have, in between of current political structure in the parliament, between the faction leaders and the leadership of the parliament, we established an ability to communicate our problems. I believe that this is one of the most essential skills for the parliamentarians to build their capacity. And of course, not all of those recommendations will be implementable, so to say, in the nearest future. But I believe some of them, just because of this particular established new skill, will be possible to set.
Now talking about the implementation and the timeline, when does the Parliament plan to start implementing these changes, these recommendations, and most importantly, when do you plan to finish?
When we were flying back from Brussels with the leader of factions, we've been discussing that some of those we would be ready to implement immediately. We would be at least happy to see them implemented. I hope that this enthusiasm will not wake until next week. And if it's not waked, then it means that probably within a few weeks we will be ready to legally settle this in their parliamentary rules and procedures, and to implement it as soon as it is possible, well, due to the flow of the parliamentary work.
Also, Mr. Pat Cox said during presenting these recommendations that one of the biggest problems of the Ukrainian parliament is unstable coalition. And this is exactly what is happening right now. There is a parliamentary crisis in the country. With this in mind, how do you plan to go forward with these reforms?
Mr. Pat Cox didn't mention it as a major problem. The major problem was an inability of Parliament to control the government. And this is the major problem. And actually, this is the cause of the current crisis that we have. That's why now we expect the reload of the government. And I hope that this new government and the MPs and the leaders of all factions that were present in Brussels, that they will negotiate those new modalities of cooperation immediately at the start of the work of new government. And if we enshrine this new practice into the practice of cooperation between the government and the parliament from the very beginning, then we will be able to make both the coalition and the government more stable. Because here, what is the essence? The government, this is the derivative of the parliament. This is the creature of the parliament. The government cannot contest the parliament, in principle, what the government is doing now. And the people, when they elect the parliament, they do it just for one reason, for the major reason, to establish the government. And the parliament established the government just for one reason, to collect and spend public money. So we have the crisis when this chain is broken. If the parliament is not able to control how government is collecting and controlling the spending of public money, it means that we will have the crisis.
Mr. If you allow, I would like to follow up on that, because this is an important point you just mentioned. What the government actually is saying, some of the ministers, what are they saying, is that they cannot go forward with the reforms which the government promised to do, because the draft bills which they are preparing are not being passed by the parliament. And just a few days before Mr. Abramovich announced his resignation, we were talking to him, we were interviewing him, and he said that we were talking about this privatization, the large-scale privatization which was announced by the government. He said that the necessary bill, the necessary laws to go forward with the privatization were voted in the first reading only with the 16th attempt.
Yes,
so
that's true.
Is that a problem?
I have an answer. It's very easy, because very first time when Mr. Abramovich came with this law a year ago, we told him that we will be ready to vote for this when we have the new law on privatization and the state property fund. Because current institution is politically dependent on the presidency, and the mechanism of decision-making process in the state property fund is actually absolutely intransparent. That will lead to corruption. So please bring us the package, the draft law that would improve the institution, and the draft law that would enable privatization.
But if we're not talking about this particular case, if we're talking more in general, do you see that there's a problem that some of the ministers who are the reformist ministers who want to make changes just face the deadlock once their reforms reach the parliament?
No, this is the same situation. This is the absolutely picturesque example.
So basically what you're saying is that the ministers are doing sloppy work with drafting the bills.
No, the ministries first, the ministers, they have to understand that to have the law passed, they have to start working with the parliament as soon as possible, not the last night before the voting. This is the key.
So basically, they're not coordinating their work, their drafting work with the MPs. Is that what you're saying?
They do not explain, and they do not hear what are the problems. And very often, the government at least brought the laws that had one, for example, benchmark from the IMF and 3 benchmarks from personally Prime Minister. and this is just cheating, you know? And this is why the laws were not adopted, because people, they didn't want to be cheated.
Mr. Now that we're talking about the laws and the adoption of the laws, the hot topic right now is the so-called visa-free laws. The EU is expecting Ukrainian Parliament to adopt a number of laws which requires which correspond to certain requirements set by the EU in order for the European Union to grant Ukrainian citizens visa-free travel to the EU countries. This is not being done, and when these laws are being passed, some of the MPs or someone are trying to leave the loopholes. So what is the real problem with adopting the necessary laws?
The real problem is very simple. A lot of politicians, not only MPs, they don't want to have their assets be publicly declared. This is the essence. This is very simple. And we have two different problems, like the conflict. On the one hand, we have committed to the Europeans that we will do this, that we will do those e-declarations. But on the other hand, we probably, at least some politicians, they hope that somehow they will, you know, escape this, this need. In fact, Europeans, when they say that we have to do this, they just expect following the commitments. There is nothing more in this situation.
Yeah, but the problem is that the Ukrainian Parliament says, yes, we're passing this law on e-declaration, but then when the people look into the law and start reading it,
this is cheating.
It's not the form.
But this is again why it happening, because from the very beginning there was no proper communication between the government and the parliament. This was the commitment and obligation on behalf of the government. The government committed this to the European, and the government didn't
there were no consultations with the
Parliament.
They
didn't bring the proper text until the very end day, you know. And in principle, when it sounds like, you know, when you want to cheat, you just have to announce from the parliamentary tribune, and then instead of proper debating. So again, we are facing the cheating of the essence of the legal document. That would probably, like, if it stayed like this, and I hope not, it would prevent Ukrainian people from controlling on the assets of politicians, and not only politicians.
Do you have confidence that the necessary laws, the necessary visa-free laws, will be passed as soon as possible in the form satisfactory to the EU, and the Ukrainian people will have the visa-free regime?
The major issue is that now we are doing this not for the Europeans. We are doing it for Ukrainian people. This is what we promised them, to be transparent.
And that is what Ukrainian people is expecting.
And this is what Ukrainian people are expecting. And this is, I hope the Ukrainian people would not allow us to escape from. So my personal, first of all, I'm committed and I will be voting for any document that would allow proper e-declaration of the assets of the politicians and state officials. And I hope that Ukrainians will not allow other politicians to escape it, including media, civil society, any people who talk to their MPs, and I hope that it will be straightly communicated also by international, and it is communicated by international community.
Well, let's see how things develop in this matter. We'll be definitely following this really closely. Mr. Reid, many thanks for joining us today. We were talking about the Ukraine week in the European Parliament and about the visa-free laws which are necessary to adopt by the Ukrainian Parliament for the Ukrainians to get the visa-free travel to the EU with the Deputy Speaker of the Ukrainian Parliament, Ms. Oksana Syroyid. I'm Volodymyr Rasulhub. Thank you for watching Ukraine Today.